Google fired the guy who invented ChatGPT, then paid over $2 billion to hire him back. His name is Noam Shazeer, and unless you're deep in the AI world, you've probably never heard of him. But here's the thing, Shazeer co-wrote the research paper that powers ChatGPT, and Gemini, and Claude, and pretty much every other major AI system you've ever interacted with. He's not on magazine covers, he doesn't give TED Talks or post hot takes online. While Sam Altman and Elon Musk were fighting over headlines, Shazeer was quietly inventing the technology they'd all end up building on. So when I started digging into this story, I thought it was just about money. A big, flashy number, 2.7 billion. But it's not really about the money at all. It's about what happens when someone sees the future clearly and the most powerful company on earth tells them no, tells them it's too risky, tells them to wait. This is a story of the most expensive rehire in corporate history, and honestly, Google probably got a bargain. To understand why, we need to go back to the year 2000. Noam Shazeer grew up in a family shaped by survival. His grandparents fled the Holocaust, but that wasn't the end of their story. They escaped into the Soviet Union, lived for a time in Israel, and eventually made it to the United States. 3 countries, decades of starting over. His father was a multilingual math teacher who eventually became an engineer. His mother raised the family. His sister would go on to be ordained as a rabbi. This was a household where education wasn't optional, it was oxygen, and Shazeer absorbed all of it. By the time he was a teenager, Shazeer was already competing against the best math students on the planet. And in 1994, he represented the United States at the International Math Olympiad. He scored a perfect 42 out of 42. So did every single one of his teammates, a perfect sweep that had only happened 3 times in the history of the competition. So this wasn't just a smart kid, this was someone operating at a level that most people can't even comprehend. He joined Google around 2000 and was one of the first few hundred employees. And almost immediately, he made an impression. He once told Eric Schmidt, Google's CEO at the time, that he'd solve general knowledge by the weekend. Now that sounds like a joke, but the people who worked with him say he wasn't entirely kidding. Schmidt himself later said, "If there's anybody he can think of in the world who's likely to achieve artificial general intelligence, it's going to be him." That's the CEO of Google saying one of his employees might build the most transformative technology in human history. Remember that, it matters later. So for about 21 years, Shazeer was Google's secret weapon. He worked on spell checking, language models, core search systems. He was brilliant and more than a little eccentric. He once described his life's purpose as divine benevolence, not exactly typical Silicon Valley talk. And then in 2017, he helped change everything. Shazeer and 7 other researchers published a paper. The title was playful, inspired by the Beatles. Attention is all you need. But what was inside the paper wasn't playful at all. It was a revolution. Here's what it did in simple terms. Before this paper, AI processed language 1 word at a time, like reading through a tiny keyhole. You could see the next word, but not the full picture. Shazeer's key invention, the transformer architecture, let AI see everything at once, the whole sentence, the whole paragraph, the full context, all at the same time. That paper now has over 60,000 citations. It's one of the most influential research papers in the history of artificial intelligence, and the paper itself credits Shazeer specifically for proposing the core innovations that made it all work. Scale dot product attention, multi-head attention, the breakthroughs that made the transformer possible. And here's the detail that says everything about what came next. Every single author on that paper eventually left Google. But Shazeer didn't just want to write papers. He wanted to build something real, something people could actually use. And that's where the story gets really interesting. So around 2018, a Brazilian engineer at Google named Daniel de Freitas started building a chatbot as a side project. Shazeer saw what de Freitas was doing and immediately understood what it could become, so he jumped in. Together they built something called Mina. And Mina was remarkable. It could discuss philosophy, banter about TV shows, generate puns that were actually funny. And remember, this was years before ChatGPT existed. Years before anyone outside of AI Labs was even talking about chatbots as a serious product. So Shazeer wrote an internal memo. He called it Mina Eats the World. In it, he predicted that conversational AI would replace traditional search engines, that chatbots would generate trillions of dollars in revenue. He wasn't being subtle. He was telling Google leadership point blank, this is the future of the entire company. Build it now or someone else will. That memo was mostly ignored. Some key decision makers reportedly laughed at it. Think about that for a second. The guy who helped invent the transformer, the foundation of all modern AI, was telling Google's leaders exactly what was coming, and they didn't listen. Now here's what I think people miss about this whole period. Shazeer wasn't some junior employee pitching a wild idea in a meeting. He was one of Google's most accomplished researchers, arguably the most accomplished, and he couldn't get anyone to take him seriously. He tried multiple times to release Mina to the public. Each attempt was blocked. Safety concerns, fairness concerns. What if the AI says something offensive? What if it makes a mistake? So then he tried offering limited research access. He tried integrating it with the Google Assistant. He tried a controlled public demo. Every single path was shut down by executives who were afraid of the risk. CEO Sundar Pichai personally asked Shazeer and the Freitas to stay, but he wouldn't commit to a release date. He wouldn't give them a timeline. He wouldn't say when or even if Mina would ever see the light of day. Shazeer later said, it caused a bit of a stir inside Google, but eventually we decided we'd probably have more luck launching stuff as a startup. That might be the understatement of the decade. So after 21 years at Google, Shazeer walked away. He gave up decades of career equity, stock options worth a fortune, access to the most powerful computing infrastructure on earth. All because Google was too afraid to let the world see what he'd already built. And what happens next? Well, it made history. In November 2021, Shazeer and the Freitas incorporated Character.ai. And less than a year later, they launched a beta version. Hundreds of thousands of interactions poured in within weeks. People loved it. Then on November 30th, 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT, and the entire world lost its mind over exactly what Shazeer had been building at Google for years. Now, he didn't need any vindication from anyone. He already knew he was right, but now, so did everyone else. And the money followed fast. Andreessen Horowitz led a $150 million funding round, valuing Character.ai at $1 billion. The mobile app got 1.7 million downloads in its first week alone. Over 20 million people were using it every month. But here's the catch. Building AI at scale is expensive. Like, really expensive. Character.ai was burning through cash on computing costs faster than the revenue could cover it. And the product was evolving in directions Shazeer hadn't fully anticipated. Users wanted companion chatbots more than the practical tools he'd envisioned. So meanwhile, Google was watching all this unfold. ChatGPT had seized the AI lead that Google should have had. The underlying technology was literally invented inside their own building, by their own people, and they'd been too cautious to ship it. Google co-founder Sergey Brin later admitted that the company had been too timid with AI. So in August 2024, Google made its move, $2.7 billion. Officially, it was structured as a licensing deal for Character AI's technology. But insiders told Wall Street Journal the real story. Shazeer's return was widely viewed as the primary reason for the entire deal. So Shazeer came back to Google, and so did the Freitas and about 30 other researchers. Shazeer became vice president, co-leading the Gemini project alongside Jeff Dean, one of the most senior technical leaders of the company. Now here's what changed how I see this whole story. We talk about AI like it's inevitable, like progress just happens, but it doesn't. AI is built by specific people with specific ideas, and sometimes one person really can be worth more than most companies on the planet. Somewhere right now, someone with a world-changing idea is stuck in a meeting, being told it's too risky. If Noam Shazeer's story tells us anything, it's that the most expensive mistake in tech isn't betting on the wrong idea, it's ignoring the right person. If this story changed how you see AI, hit subscribe. We've got more coming.